Similar to other OpenSciEd units, this unit begins with an anchoring phenomena routine in Lesson 1. The anchoring phenomenon routine is used to launch a unit of study and drive student motivation throughout the unit. Recognition that we don't have this phenomenon fully figured out leads us to asking questions. The questions we ask about the anchoring phenomena or design problem become our shared mission to figure out in this unit.
In Lesson 1, the unit starts with a discussion about what has changed for students and other people because of the pandemic. We start here with student experiences and experiences we've heard about, and look at community data that represents the impact of the pandemic on different communities in different areas across the United States. Here, it's important to note the data provided in the unit was up to date as of July 2021. There's information in the teacher guide for how to update the data if you wish to track cases through the present. From there, as a class, we realized that there are some significant differences between the communities in each of the areas we investigated. Students decide what pieces of data they want to analyze for each factor they're exploring. And with their group, they explore the communities or neighborhood in one of the 3 focal areas, using Google Maps to test their ideas and think of new possible factors. Groups share patterns they noticed in the data set they analyzed for the different communities or neighborhoods in their area and share the observations and key points. Then, together as a class, students make observations about patterns they see across the different areas that the group studied. Students then work individually to create an initial model to use what they know so far to answer the question, how can we explain the differences in transmission and health outcomes between different communities? Finally, students look back to their handouts to revisit the places we stopped and recorded questions so far, and reflect on any new questions that surfaced as they created their initial model. The class shares their questions publicly by building a driving question board. To build a driving question board, each student writes 3 or 4 questions, each on a separate sticky note related to COVID-19 or a unit question, which is, how can we explain the differences in transmission and health outcomes between different communities? In the classroom, we suggest a process for building the driving question board. The first student would come up to the driving question board with a sticky note, faces the class, and remains standing. The student reads the question they wrote on that sticky note and then posts it on the driving question board. The student then selects the next student. The second student reads their question and posts it on the driving question board either by itself if it's unique or near the first question if their questions are similar. The student then selects the next student, and this process continues until everyone has had a chance to post their question. When the driving question board is constructed, celebrate it as a class. Take in all the questions and important thinking the class did.
I was really curious before we did this unit what questions students were going to ask, because they were living in the pandemic, so they were experiencing the phenomenon in real time. And I didn't know if they were overwhelmed by COVID-19 information all the time or if they had questions. And I was really pleased with the questions that they asked. They asked really great questions like, will there be a vaccine? And if there is, will people take it? Will we be required to take the vaccine? How does this virus spread? How can we stop the spread of this virus? How are different communities dealing with the pandemic? Are communities equally impacted? They also asked questions about future pandemics and historical pandemics and how we could take what we've learned from the COVID-19 pandemic and help our world be better prepared for future pandemics, which is great because all those questions come up in our unit.
To wrap up Lesson 1 and navigate to the next lesson, the teacher will facilitate a discussion to help organize the driving question board in a way that groups similar questions together. While there are many ways to do this, it's helpful to facilitate the discussion so questions end up grouped into 3 categories. The first being threats that may lead to infection or negative outcomes, risks that may increase the realization of the threats, and finally, protections, which are ways that may mitigate the risk from the threat. As the class organizes the driving question board, the discussion also helps navigate to the next lesson by deciding which of the groups of questions makes sense to tackle first. Since it's hard to talk about risk or protection if you don't understand the threat, it makes sense to learn more about exactly what the COVID-19 virus is and how it makes us sick.